This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, real MVPs, Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And you might be thinking something. First off, you're on podcast services around the world, nothing has changed. It is show as usual for you. But if you're on YouTube, you're like, guys, there's a problem. Why am I seeing the logo again? And last week, it's because I'm an idiot. And I accidentally deleted the first half of our Virginia Tech video, which, yet again, Ricky's an idiot. Today I'm an idiot as well because I left the camera stand in my other car. So it wasn't in the car that I was using today, and therefore I did not have it when I got home. So, because of that, because of Ricky being an idiot, can't say that enough, we are going to be audio only on podcast services around the world, as well as youtube.com/most valuable podcast. I think that's what it is, or it's most valuable pod reel, something like that, our YouTube channel as well. But we got a jam-packed show for you guys. Before we get into everything, though, a little bit of housekeeping here at the beginning. Number one, make sure to check out patreon.com/most valuable podcast. That's where you can help support the channel and be rewarded for doing so. One of those rewards is joining a podcast each and every month. You help us out. Also, go and get yourself an MVP t-shirt. That is down below in the description. You can also catch it at mostvaluablepodcasts.com. You can catch MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, if you're on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, make sure to give us a 5-star rating if you please. But if you're also on YouTube, if you got it, please go over there. Give us that 5-star rating. Tell us why you like listening to the podcast. Because, Brandon, we got to do our annual... Our weekly check.
Our weekly check. That is not an annual check.
Well,
that would be weekly.
Annual is yearly, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. So our reviews for the Primetime Podcast, let's see if it's still the only... Yeah, it's still the only one. SEC. We are a couple of good old boys, and all we're going to talk about is the SEC. But the good news is we have 3 topics for today, and one of them is kind of SEC, but it's not all SEC. We're going to talk about who's got the bigger college football playoff worry after the first 3 weeks of the season, Auburn or Wisconsin. Then we're going to look at college football week 4, Stanford and Oregon. Should the Cardinal be worried about the Ducks? Then we're going to look at Ohio State. Are they a playoff lock now that Urban Meyer is returning to the sideline for the rest of the season? They are now 3-0 after beating TCU this past weekend. And then we're going to close the podcast doing like we always do, Brandon. We're going to make our picks to close out the podcast. But the first thing I will ask you is basically this. After 3 weeks, Auburn this week, yes, they got a big win over Washington to start the year, but they lose by 1 point to LSU. Wisconsin looked good first 2 weeks of the year. They lose a tough one to BYU this week. The upset alert was going off in Madison. I'll ask you, which fan base, which team should be more worried, should be worried about the college football playoff? The Auburn Tigers or the Wisconsin Badgers?
See, for me, it is Wisconsin. And the reason it's Wisconsin for me is because in my mind, I never believed that Auburn was going to be able to get to the college football playoff. I believe there are too many factors in front of them, with Alabama being the number one factor because they're both in the West. Alabama, in my mind, is going to win the West.
Yeah.
But the reason why I think that it's Wisconsin is because coming into this season, I mean, everyone saw what Wisconsin did last year. They were a win away from being a playoff team. And all they needed to do was beat Ohio State. They couldn't do it. I believe that they were good enough this year to be able to do that, to win their side in the West and be able to play Ohio State and beat them this year. Well, the way that Ohio State has played, they've been absolutely dominant in this past Saturday's game, which we'll get into later, certainly solidified that for me. But for Wisconsin, seeing how they played against BYU, their offense struggled mightily. And Hornibrook really struggled to get anything going, had a turnover. The defense for Wisconsin gave up a lot of yards and multiple touchdowns on the ground, which is something that they did not see at the beginning of the season. Even though I know a lot of people may say, well, they've got, Nebraska and Rutgers and Purdue, who's really faltered early, and Minnesota on there, and Minnesota is a 3-0 team, but on their schedule, they'll be okay. I still think, though, one loss now, Ohio State, anything can happen there, but Ohio State's looking like a team that may not lose at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it comes down to it, and it is Ohio State and Wisconsin in that Big Ten title game, I'm not so confident in Wisconsin anymore now, unless they turn that offense around.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest with you, they have a big game now. They let's be honest. They thought they were going to go 3-0. They did not expect to lose against BYU. Now that they lost against BYU, they have an even bigger game coming up this weekend at Kinnick Stadium in Iowa.
Yeah, and I was looking at that, I'll be honest, and this is one thing I'll spoil from our pick segment. I was looking at that game against Iowa, and I was like, do I hit the button on that? Do I hit the button on that game? I basically can't. I'm still going to go with Wisconsin just because I know what this team can be. The funny thing is, like, you say that they expected to go 3-0. Just last week when I was watching BYU play Cal, I was looking at this team and I was going, this is not a good team. I know they beat Arizona week 1, but Kevin Sumlin's not good. Let's be honest about that. And then it's like, I see him getting whooped by Cal, and yeah, they only lost 21-18, but they didn't look too good. I'm like, man, this team's going to get rolled by Wisconsin. Did they get rolled? No, they came in there, played tough, and they shocked the top 10 team in the Big Ten.
But we all know what Wisconsin did last year to Ohio State when Ohio State went in there and played, and no one believed that outcome was going to be what it ended up being. No one believed that there would be so many interceptions in that game, with Josh Jackson being a huge factor in that game with 3 interceptions of his own against J.T. Barrett. Remember, the J.T. Barrett for the Ohio State. Or as I really like Rich Eisen, the Ohio Statement University.
The Ohio Statement University. So you're saying Wisconsin has more to worry.
I'm saying that, yes, Wisconsin has more to worry about in terms of a playoff chance than Auburn because of the fact that I really never put Auburn in that category, but also I think Auburn has more top tier teams to go through than Wisconsin does. They'll have to go through a Michigan on the road, yes, and Michigan seems like they're starting to get things going a little bit, and they'll be on the road at Penn State as well, and Penn State has been scoring some points. They've started to get things going a little bit. Again, still not against any really strong opponents, but I think that the schedule is more difficult for Auburn.
I am going to go on the other side of you. I'm going to say that Auburn has more to worry about, and the reason why is you talked about it, that tough schedule. And maybe this is because I had Auburn as one of the teams that could be in the running for a playoff. Hell, they were a team that won their side and was in the SEC championship against Georgia last year. Because they have so many tough opponents, this loss to LSU, kind of like a little bit of a confidence shock right now, where it's like, oh, we came in, you beat the number 6 team in Washington week 1. You're flying high. This team is really good. We're going to do good things. And then LSU comes in and they beat you by 1 point. And it was a home game. And how many times, the thing I find funny, and of course I can say this because LSU won and I picked them, how many comments did we see this week where people were like, Auburn hasn't lost at home since 1992? It's like, it doesn't matter. Anybody can win on any Saturday. Now that LSU beat you, you got to go into Georgia. You got to go to Alabama this year. Yes, you got the Aggies coming in, but the Aggies look like a much different team with Jimbo Fisher rather than Dan Mullen at the head. Not Dan Mullen, Kevin Sumlin. I was thinking the next ranked team that they're going to have to play on the road in Mississippi State. And although Mississippi State is probably the one where I'm like, okay, that one I'll give you more confidence in winning that game than the other 3. The big thing is, now that you lost to LSU, if you lose any, just based off the way Alabama has played, if you lose any other SEC game, you're toast. You're not going to win, especially if you lose to Alabama. So for me, Auburn's basically on, you got to win every game from here on out, because that's going to be the toughness of schedule is either going to be Auburn's biggest strength. They win it all. They would get in over a team like Wisconsin. I mean, just look at the rankings. Wisconsin is below Auburn at this point. But if they lose to a Georgia, if they lose to an Alabama in the regular season, I'm sorry, you're done and your chicken is cooked. You're not getting into the college football playoff.
The Tigers are in trouble. They definitely are. And I think that the reason we saw so many comments this past week on the video...
Because fans were confident.
But there was a reason to be confident.
Yeah.
Jared Stidham has looked really good until this past weekend's game against at Jordan-Hare Stadium against LSU. 2 interceptions. Again, I've mentioned this so many times on these podcasts. The team that is winning the turnover battle... That's the team that's most likely going to win, and that's what LSU did. They did not turn the football over at all. I've got to really give credit, and I'm not going back on any statements, but Joe Burrow looked really good. Joe Burrow, 249 yards, a touchdown, and the biggest thing is no interceptions. I know he went 15 of 34. His completion percentage isn't that great, but he didn't turn the football over. And he made enough plays to keep his team in the ball game because they were losing down to the very end. I mean, it was a back and forth game a little bit, but Auburn had the lead until the end. This is a team, an LSU team that's going to be very dangerous this season. I can already tell you. And LSU fans are going to be saying, Brandon, I could have already told you before the season started. But I do like what LSU has done to start this season. And talk about confidence. They are a team that their confidence is going to continue to grow each and every week, especially with wins like this. And that's what's going to make this team even more dangerous.
I'm going to inject this question into the conversation really quick. Revisit a topic we went over 2 weeks ago. Now, after this upset win over Auburn, does the upset percentage go up a little bit when LSU now plays Alabama? Because at first you were like, not a chance. Does that maybe go up a little bit? Not saying that you're saying LSU would beat Alabama, but it's like, okay, I thought it was a 10% chance. Now it could be a 30% chance. Like, does that percentage go up after this win?
Well, before it was a 5% chance, now it's a 5.3% chance.
Still confident in his tide.
But you have to be.
I know.
How can one not be
the gold
confident in Alabama, especially the way that Alabama has played? Everything has gone right so far for the Crimson Tide. And again, they haven't gotten into the meat of their schedule where they're playing some of the tough opponents and stuff like that. But still, they are their performance just this past week against an SEC rival in Ole Miss. And I don't even know if you can call them much of a rival anymore, or at least at this point. And they win 62-7. That is absolutely impressive for Alabama. And they have so much talent on that team. There is so much talent on that offense. And with Tua running that offense, he is gonna find a way to score whether your defense is good or not. And then the running game is great with Harris. And I just think that this defense for Alabama, too, they're too good. They're too good up front. Their secondary is outstanding. As long as they can stay away from injuries, which is what I think could be the one thing that hurts Alabama. If it gets to the point where they would be playing LSU, I think that could be the one thing that could hurt Alabama is on November 3rd, is if the Crimson Tide have seen a lot of injuries rack up, because while Alabama's first stringers we know are very good defensively, I'm not sure how much depth they have at this point. And that's where LSU could maybe slide in and pull one over on the Tide. But if Alabama stays fairly healthy, consistently healthy throughout the next couple of weeks, I still think that's a game that Alabama wins, that LSU can try and play well in. But that Alabama defense, it's just something different. You know, just kind of like this past weekend with Ohio State. This Ohio State defense is just something different that you don't see every week. Even when you're seeing a good team, even if TCU, well, I was going to use a bad example of Oklahoma. That's not seeing a good defense. But, you know, if they're seeing another quality opponent, they're still not even seeing up to the level where Ohio State is defensively. So LSU, they put themselves in a great position at 3-0. And going back to kind of the topic, is I do believe that Auburn is in they're in one of those between a rock and a hard place type of situations, and I do believe that, and their fans who are hopeful and are good fans are going to say no they're not, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they play Mississippi State on the road, they play Texas A&M at home, and we saw that Texas A&M is a good team this season
no matter where they play.
Georgia on the road, Alabama to end the season on the road. All those teams right now are currently ranked.
Mm-hmm.
All those teams right now are really good. So there's a lot of obstacles to overcome for Auburn. But the reason why I still think it's Wisconsin is because personally, my hopes were higher for Wisconsin at the beginning of the season. As I said at the top of this segment, I did not believe that the Auburn Tigers were even going to make it into the college football playoff. I didn't really have them near the playoff because I believed there were too many obstacles to potentially overcome there. For Wisconsin, I believe that they were going to run away with the West, and I believe that they were finally going to be able to beat Ohio State. After this past weekend's loss to BYU, a tough matchup coming up this weekend on the road at Iowa, and then a Michigan and a Penn State to have to deal with as well, both teams on the road. It's looking like a really tough road right now for Wisconsin unless they're able to turn it around and find some offense.
I mean, the thing, though, that I look at, and this is what I'm going to say, jumping back to Wisconsin, because you mentioned them, is the reason why I wouldn't worry much if you were Wisconsin, because the yin and the yang of this, too, is Wisconsin lost a non-conference game. Auburn lost a conference
You're right.
game.
They
and
did.
For Auburn, like we've mentioned, their conference is very loaded. So it's like, great. Now if we lose to a Georgia or an Alabama, now things really get interesting. Like they almost need, this is what they need. They basically need, let's say they lose to Georgia. Then they need Georgia to beat LSU. They need Georgia, Texas A&M to beat LSU, and then LSU to beat Alabama so that they can beat Alabama. Like, they would need numerous things to happen now in order to get into the college football playoff, even get into the SEC title game if they lose one more game. But I look at Wisconsin, and like at the beginning of the year, the thing about we said with Wisconsin's schedule is, the only thing that we can't like about this, Michigan on the road, Penn State on the road, Purdue on the road, Northwestern on the road. So far through 3 weeks, Purdue's looked like the joke that we remember of them. Like, they are a team where that first game, there was so, like, ever since that final play I talked about after week 1, that was the boneheaded move to throw the running back to the ground and basically hand the Wildcats the game and say, here you go. Do you like the bow that I picked out for you? I went to Walgreens and picked it out myself. Ever since that moment, it's kind of been like Purdue hasn't found their rhythm at all. And they're now 0-3 after they disrespected you, Brandon. You picked them in our first ever non-top 25 pick of the week, and they let you down this week, getting upset. And then you look at Michigan, you look at Northwestern, they haven't looked that strong as well. So it's like, okay, the two tough teams on our side of the Big Ten really don't look that tough after 3 weeks of the year. Then you look at Penn State and Michigan. Now, I know Penn State, it's going to be a different Penn State team when we get to November 10th. And I guess you can say the same thing for Purdue, but with already one Big Ten loss, and if you get another one by that time, that game might be meaningless for Purdue, where it's like, great, well, we're not going to win this side of the Big Ten. And do they phone it in? Do they try to, like, I'm not saying they will, but like sometimes you get that where it's like, you know what, it's November 17th. I just want the season to be over. We're out of it kind of a thing. You don't know if a team's going to have that kind of attitude. Then you look at Michigan and Penn State. Yeah, they're on the road, but Penn State has not looked as sharp as we thought Penn State would be coming into this year. And same thing for Michigan, unless Michigan played like SMU or something. Like, unless they were playing SMU or Western Michigan, when they went up against their only quality opponent so far, they haven't looked good. And probably the next time they will get a quality opponent is when Michigan plays Wisconsin on the 10th, unless Maryland comes to town, because I'm not high on Nebraska so far. I haven't seen what we all thought the Scott Frost era would be in Nebraska, and Northwestern has not wowed me enough to be like, yeah, that's going to be a good game in Evanston against Michigan and Northwestern. So, I mean, I look at everything and I go, Wisconsin, from this point on, if you just, like, nothing changes for Wisconsin. Take care of business in your conference, get to the Big Ten title game, odds are you'll probably play Ohio State, and if you beat Ohio State, maybe that'll be a quality of enough win to then get you into the playoff. The only thing that both of these teams are going to also be fighting is if Georgia and Alabama are both good and their title game is close, if they play in a title game, do both of them make the playoff again? Like, there are so many factors. I know it's only week 4, but, like, that's everything that's going around. You know I'm throwing a lot out there.
But the picture is already started to be framed.
Take shape.
It's taking shape right now. I mean, Wisconsin, there is so much more season to go. Yes, I realize that. We haven't even reached October
yet. I mean, LSU could upset Georgia, and that's a whole different picture.
But still, I mean, you for Wisconsin, you're looking at a team that lost to a non-conference team in BYU that they did not expect to lose to. You know, they may have expected 1 or 2 losses on their. I don't want to say they expected it, but let's say you're a fan. Let's say you're a fan and you think, okay, well, 1, 2 losses, 1 or 2 losses.
One loss, we can get through.
But guess what? You were not planning on 1 or 2 of those losses being BYU.
No.
So now, if you're Wisconsin, you have to say, okay, well, if we were counting on maybe 2 losses, well, now we have to back that up, and okay, we can only lose 1 more game. If we're going to lose, we can only lose 1 more game. And that's it. Because if it gets down to 3 losses, it's, you know, you allow for, I don't know. I don't know.
Both teams just need to win out to make the playoff.
You're opening it up for a team like an Iowa who could go on another run. And what were they? 8-4 last season, 8-5 overall, I think. You open it up for a team like Iowa, who kind of laying in the weeds, waiting for this exact situation to happen,
like
and then they come and
State.
they pounce, and all of a sudden, the Iowa Hawkeyes are the team to beat in the West, and Wisconsin's hopes just wither away.
Well, and that's another thing, too, of, like, both of these teams need to win out. In my mind, need to win out to make the playoff, because the one thing you have to look at is, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Alabama did have 2 losses last year, didn't they? Or did they only have the 1 loss to Auburn?
I believe they just had the 1 loss.
I don't believe then we have seen a team, like, I don't believe we've seen a team yet that has been like, hey, they're going to be the team to kind of make the playoffs at 2 losses. If you look at last year, not week 4, I don't want week 4. Computer's giving me all sorts of things. So week 15, 2-loss team we're talking about, Ohio State, did not get in. You look at 2016 with the playoff picture. If I go down to week 15, because it keeps wanting to give me week 4, the 2-loss team we were talking about, the Big Ten champion, Penn State. But Ohio State only had 1 loss. Then if you go to 2015, this is the last year I'll go to, you've got 2-loss Stanford, did not get in. Now, that year, we also did have a 1-loss Iowa team and a 1-loss Ohio State team that did not get in as well. But you see my point. There is, like, I'm not saying it's impossible, because if enough teams
certainly
lose,
nothing is impossible in college football. We know that.
But the odds are highly against you. To quote Hunger Games, the odds are not in your favor if you lose 2 games. And now that you lost 1, both Auburn and Wisconsin, you basically got to win out. And with that mindset alone of you have to win out, I look at it and I go, Auburn has the tougher schedule. They have the tougher road. So if I was an Auburn fan, I would be worrying right now. Because like you said with Wisconsin, you didn't expect one of those losses to be to BYU. I think the same thing could be said about the Auburn Tigers. You respected LSU coming in. You knew they were a tough team. But let's be honest, at the beginning of the year, we were thinking, like, there was discussion on ESPN on College Football Daily where they were talking about if LSU goes 1-2, we could see Ed Orgeron fired. And now they're 3-0, and nobody's talking about the hot seat in LSU for Ed Orgeron. So it's like, just like Wisconsin didn't expect to lose to BYU, same thing can be said, or BYU, same thing can be said for Auburn and LSU. And now that you did, it makes those Georgia and Alabama games a must win. And if I'm picking a schedule, if you just gave me blank schedules, no teams, and told me pick one, I would pick Wisconsin's all day because it's not littered with top 25 teams. And now it's Auburn. If you want to prove you're a playoff team, you have to, because you basically have to win out.
I think that my final thoughts on this for Wisconsin, you have to be worried about their offense. They haven't done enough offensively. They haven't been able to move the ball as much as they'd like to. And I think we saw that last week against BYU. Now, Jonathan Taylor is going to be a guy that they continuously lean on. And he has 77 carries already, 515 yards, 5 touchdowns.
But what can they do when he doesn't get into the end zone?
Exactly. That's the thing. And Alex Hornibrook has a 63.2 completion percentage. That's fine. That's good. But he has 3 TDs. He has 2 interceptions. He needs to be doing more. He needs to be doing more. He needs to take more of a leadership role, and he needs to move that offense. It has to move through him. While, yes, they want to be able to have success with Jonathan Taylor, Hornibrook has to do more as a leader on that football team. And I would say, I'm not trying to knock him, but also over to Auburn, on my final thoughts with them is that Jarrett Stidham has to be better. He has to be better. He has to play up. And his 2 interceptions this past weekend, it sunk him. It really did. He needs to be better. He will be, but this last one, it hurts.
Well, for me, the big thing is, and with Auburn, I've gave mine. You've got a tough schedule. You got to put up or shut up. And basically, you're almost like, I'm going to use the Old Yeller reference again. We've brought you behind the barn. We got the gun ready. We got it ready. You just got to prove to us if we're going to use it or not. Because one more loss and we use it, and then your season's done. But for Wisconsin, the thing with Jonathan Taylor, I look at the BYU game now, and if I'm a team going up against Wisconsin, I go, all right, here's the game plan. We contain Jonathan Taylor. We let him get all the yards he wants. He can get 117 yards. He can get 145 yards. Keep him out of the end zone. Let someone else beat us. Force Hornibrook to beat us. Because that's what you proved in game 3 of like, if Hornibrook, if you're not going to beat us, I'm going to make you beat us. Because then it's like, you know what? You made the better play. Okay. But we're not going to let Jonathan Taylor beat us. And that's what BYU did. We're not going to let him beat us. We're going to let Hornibrook beat us. And it proved to be not good for the Wisconsin Badgers in the end. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. Who should worry more about the college football playoff? Auburn fans, Wisconsin fans. If you are a Tiger or Badger fan, let us know your level of worry down below in the comment section. But Brandon, let's move on into our next segment. We're taking a look at your favorite conference, one you like to talk about. We talked about them last week, and the fast break curse, or not the fast break, the primetime podcast curse is back again, where we talk about a team that's really hot. They lose their next game. The Arizona State Sun Devils were the ones that fell. We talked really high about Herm Edwards, what they're doing. They're going to beat San Diego State, and they lost.
And you know what's really funny is that watching game day on Saturday morning, everyone on game day, Arizona State, and then it gets to Herbie, and he goes, yeah, I'm going against you. I'm going to go San Diego State. He goes, everything seems to be going against them, so they'll win. And they did.
And they did. And I saw that, and I was like, the primetime podcast curse strikes again. The one I'll never forget is basketball season. We did the Hawkeyes, and we're like, oh, could the Hawkeyes do this and that because they're so great? And they lost their next 2. And their season was over.
We did that so many times.
Michigan State, too. They're undefeated. Can they? And they lost. Like the next game,
exactly.
They lost.
It totally happens every time.
The game we're talking about this week, and we're taking an in-depth look on, is Stanford, Oregon. This one taking place in Eugene, Oregon. Both teams 3-0. Stanford, number 7. Oregon, number 20. And usually, Brandon, I usually toss it to you. I say, oh, what are you thinking about this game? And the question for this one is basically, should the Cardinal be worried about the Ducks? But instead, I'm going to take this one first. I'm actually going to Brett Favre it. The pass was tipped at the line of scrimmage, and now I have caught it, and I am trying to run for some yards to gain in this one. And this is, to me, an interesting game early in the year because these are two teams. Both of them are 3-0. And here's the reason why. I'm going to set up the stage for why Stanford should be worried. If you're a Stanford fan, why you should be worried about going into Oregon, going into Eugene to play the Ducks. And that is because for 3 straight weeks, Brandon, I have seen first week 1 against San Diego State. First off, Stanford only led 9-7 going into halftime. The second thing, 0 first quarter points. Then against USC, you went into halftime leading 7-0, but you only scored 7 points in that first quarter. Then UC Davis. You went into halftime up 17-3, but you went into the second quarter down 3-0. Yet again, a goose egg in the first quarter. Whereas I look at Oregon, and the only game they have kind of struggled in the first quarter, game 1 against Bowling Green. They're down 10-7, but then they score 30 in the second quarter. Then Portland State, they're already up 14-0. Then they go up, what would that be? 35-7 going into half. Then you've got the last game against San Jose State. They're already up 14-0 after 1. They go into halftime up 21-6. They win 35-22. And that is the reason why I would be worried if I was Stanford, because this Stanford offense to me, and based off of the opponents you have played, San Diego State, I know we just said they beat Arizona State. They're a team that you started off slow against. Any other team, if you played any other respected team, if you played a Washington week 1, no way you're going into half only up 9-7. You're probably going down in that game 38-9 based off of how you played. Then you also play a team like UC Davis and you're down 3-0 going into the second quarter. If I'm Stanford, I'm worried because if this offense starts out slow in this one, then they don't got a chance in my mind. Patrick Kane-isms, not a chance in this one, because there's a good thing that if this Cardinal team starts out slow, Brandon, they could be down 14, 21, 28 points going into halftime, going into the second quarter even against the Ducks in Eugene.
I think the biggest thing for me is what's going on with Bryce Love. Mm-hmm. What's going on with Bryce Love? An undisclosed injury that was suffered late in the USC win, and they pulled him out of that one, and he didn't return. He did not play this past week against UC Davis. So, I know it was just UC Davis, but you hold him out of that game, most likely because you didn't need him anyways. But he doesn't play at all. Stanford head coach David Shaw says that he expects for a senior running back to be out there in week 4. But again, what's going on with him? What happened? And is he for sure going to be out there? And will he be at 100%? If he is not, 2 out of the 3 games that Bryce Love has played in so far, excuse me. Yeah, no.
He's played 2 games.
He's played 2 games because he was not in the third one.
Yeah.
But his first game, it was a clunker. Second game against USC, it was really good. Then he doesn't play in the third game. Bryce Love is off to a shaky season so far due to ineffectiveness and now injury. And that's what I'm most worried about. That is what I'm the most worried about when you're talking about the Stanford Cardinal, because it is Bryce Love who has been their offense, their centerpiece for so long. It's like with the Minnesota Vikings back in the day. You take Adrian Peterson away, and then all of a sudden, what do you have? And that's how I feel like this team is right now. So if you do not have Bryce Love against a quality opponent like an Oregon team, what do you have? What will your team be able to do? How do you adjust? And while I do think that there has been some good play so far this season by KJ Costello, I think he's done well. I still don't know if you put everything on him. Is he going to be able to shoulder all of that against an Oregon Ducks type of team? He had 183 yards and a touchdown against USC, and I think would probably be, out of the 3 games, the one game that you look at and say, okay, this is probably how he could really be, because he's going against a tougher USC team. But after this weekend, I don't know if that would even, if that still holds after getting throttled by Texas. But that's where I'm at right now. And I like what Oregon's doing. The Ducks are playing some good football. Now, have they played against lesser opponents so far to start the season? Yes, they have. And also, you look at the amount of points that each team's giving up. I think Stanford's around 8 points, and the Ducks are around 20.
Yeah. 7.7 to 20 are the two. And for me, like, the biggest thing, like I said, is now the question is, can Stanford's defense hold the Ducks back? I look at that equation. Anytime you're talking Ducks, I look at that equation and go, it's not a standard. It's not like you're in algebra class, and it's not like your standard x minus 2 equals y. It's not one of those. It's one of your, like, x minus y parentheses to the second minus this square root of that. It's like this big equation where you got to solve for x, and you're sitting there and you're just going, damn it, how do I do this one? That's what it is with Oregon. And for me, the only reason, I said at the beginning of the segment, the only reason why I'm worried for Stanford is because of how slow they have started in games. Like, this is not the type of game where UC Davis, you can get away with, we didn't start good in the first half, we didn't start good in the first quarter, picked it up at halftime, and then we blew away with it. Where most teams in the first 2 weeks, we see slow start first half, go into halftime, get coached up, come out ready to go, and then they just blow the doors off in the second half. You can't do that against Oregon, because if you blink, Oregon's up 21-0. You blink again, they're up 35-0. And that's the thing for me, which, because of the offense's inability to score early in the game, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this defense to get stops early in the game, because I'm not confident in the Cardinal to go pound for pound, score for score with the Ducks in a first quarter to start the game on Saturday.
Here's what I will say. Well, when we came into this season, Ricky, when we were doing the preview, going all the way back to the preview for Stanford.
Don't you love how they all changed by this time?
But we did talk about their defense and how this season their defense was going to be different. It was going to be their defense that held them back. And I think that is still something that, as we continue on, we'll be able to see a little bit more of as they start to get into conference play, more of conference play, and see what happens here. But will this defense be able to make Justin Herbert feel uncomfortable? Now, Justin Herbert, he's thrown 12 touchdown passes through 3 games, but he's also thrown 4 interceptions. And here's the thing, is that in 2 of his 3 games, his passer completion percentage has been under 50%. In the game against Portland State, he had it up almost near 77% on his completion rate. That's outstanding. But the other 2, it was 47.6 against Bowling Green, 47.1 against San Jose State, and those were the 2 games where he threw 2 interceptions apiece. Can Stanford's defense capitalize on bringing pressure against him and making some big plays off of some errant throws that Herbert has already so far this season against lesser opponents been prone to throwing? So now if they're able to do that, Stanford would get the advantage in my mind. But if they're not, and if Bryce Love is either not playing or not playing up to his standard, that could really spell bad things for Stanford.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at it and really, you look at the only game where Herbert, it would be like his worst game, you could say, is probably the last one stat-wise, but it's not even that terrible. Like, 47 completion percentage is god-awful. I don't care what you're saying. You want to be around that 60 mark. You want to at least be at 50 at the end of the day. Yeah, he had 309 yards, but only 3 touchdowns to 2 INTs, whereas game 1... yeah, he was at about 48 completion percentage, but he had 5 touchdowns to 2 INTs, and he had a rush on the ground for another score. Can this defense, like, that's the true question you asked. can this Stanford defense hold the Oregon offense? And for me, I just look at what Oregon's done and take it with a grain of salt, because like you also said early on, look at the opponents Oregon has played so far. They've played Bowling Green, they've played Portland State, and they've played San Jose State. So they're not really playing world beaters out there.
No, they're not.
To start the year. And if you even look at, if you look at last year's game, which I know is a little, it's a little different to look at last year because Herbert wasn't there. Cristobal wasn't the head coach. Royce Freeman was out there. He's not there now. So this team is different, but Oregon went into Stanford, and the thing that helped Stanford out is, they won 49-7, but they won the first quarter. The first quarter, they won 21-7. Then after that, it was touchdown. Oh, 2 touchdowns here. And they kept Oregon in check. Oregon only scored 7 points, which they got in that first quarter, but 21 first quarter points from Stanford. They're going to need that again because I don't think this Stanford defense has it in them to do what they did last year and only hold the Ducks to 7 points all game.
I don't think they do either. They've lost too much, and they haven't been able to gain enough back in terms of recruiting and everything like that. This Oregon Duck team, yes, they have put up a lot of points against opponents that aren't at this level that Stanford is, but still they've put up a lot of points. And Justin Herbert coming into the season, I know I told you when we talked about Oregon in their preview, I was really excited for this kid. I was really excited. I think that he's going to be really good, and so far this season, he's come out and he's looked pretty darn good for the most part. Like you said, and like I mentioned, would love to see the completion percentage certainly be above 50, be near the 60 mark, and those interceptions take those away. That's 4 through 3 games. But he's also been able to score a lot. He's been able to put up a lot of points. But what are you doing when you're not putting up a lot of points? Are you still throwing those interceptions, or are you being careful? And I don't want to say conservative because people hear conservative in sports and they think, you're not trying.
But
you're not trying to score.
You're not being a gunslinger out there.
Well, exactly. And that's when people would be like, well, being more like Joe Burrow is better.
Field manager.
Because he is, yes, maybe not lighting up the scoreboard, but you know what he's not doing? He's not allowing the other team to light it up either. So that's where Herbert, I think, needs to find that kind of happy medium where, yes, he's lighting up the scoreboard, but when it gets into big games, like this weekend's game will be, you cannot allow a less than stellar Stanford defense take advantage of any type of turnovers. So you just can't put the ball into their hands.
Here's the thing I'm going to say, and we're about, give or take, about a month away from our first big board for the NFL season. October 15th will be the night that you and I record our first NFL big board. And if we would have done our first one, if we would have done like a way too early, I probably wouldn't have had a single quarterback in my top 25, or might have had one at 25. And the thing that is interesting is if you look at the way too early mock draft that Mark and I did on the onside kick, although it was only 10 picks, he had Justin Herbert as a top 10 pick. He had him at number 8 going to the New York Football Giants. This is the type of game, I know this is a little bit different than the original question, but this could also be a statement game for Herbert, where if he plays well against Stanford in this type, he's not going to have the away crowd. He's going to be home in Autzen. He's going to be in Eugene. This could be a statement game for him. And on the other side of it, with Stanford, we just talked about college football playoff. If they lose to Oregon, not only does that hurt their Pac-12 chances because Oregon's in the same side of the Pac-12 as them, but guess who Stanford has in their next game on the road at South Bend? They've got Notre Dame. So if you lose to Oregon and then you lose another one to Notre Dame, who has not looked amazing but has looked better than I thought they would be this year, you lose this week to Oregon, you lose your next game to Notre Dame, your season's done. You ain't making the college football playoff. And I know you're already behind the 8 ball because you're in the Pac-12. Like Pac-12 and Big Ten, or not Big Ten, Big 12, you're kind of fighting for a spot because the SEC might be taking 2 from you.
Well, depending on how things play out, it will be interesting. Like we mentioned in one of the previous segments, anything can happen in college football, and we've seen it.
Any final thoughts? I know we're going to give the pick later, but any final thought in this one before we move on?
I think we're going to see a good game. I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think that one team is going to run away with it. It could be a shootout, but I don't think there's going to be a lopsided ball game in Eugene.
I will save my pick for the pick segment, but I will say this. 28-7 at the end of one, Oregon. That's how I think this game is going to start out. How it finishes, you'll have to wait for the pick segment to see how that goes. But let us know what you guys think down below.
It's a tease in the biz.
That's what we call a tease in the biz. But let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. Should Stanford be worried about Oregon? Is Oregon going to get the jump on Stanford in this one? What are you thinking about this game? Are you excited for it? Not excited? Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. But Brandon, let's move on into our final segment before we make our picks for Week 4 in college football. And we're moving on. I don't think we've talked too much about this team or anything, right? I mean, Ohio State, we haven't mentioned them in a while.
I've never heard of them. What conference do they play in?
Why would they be in the news recently?
Are they Team USA?
I think they are, but why would they be in the news recently? But we're talking about them because, yes, they went 3-0 without Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer now comes back against Tulane because, they really needed him against Tulane. And here's what I'm going to ask you, Brandon, just right off the top. Is Ohio State a playoff lock now that Urban Meyer's returning and they've gone 3-0 to start?
Urban Meyer, I think, could never come back to this team this season, and they would be a playoff lock. What we saw
if they went 0-3.
We saw what we saw this past weekend was really outstanding from the defense for most of the game. Now they gave up some huge plays to Darius Anderson for TCU, and he was a man on a mission running wild. 12 carries, 154 yards, and 2 TDs. Coming into the game, I think his first 2 games maybe totaled 154 yards, probably not even, but this was a statement game. It was certainly a statement game made by Ohio State because they showed after they played Rutgers, blew them out. After they played Oregon State, blew them out. There were people, and plenty of them, that believed TCU had a chance in this game. There were even some people that believed TCU was going to win this game. Now, TCU did look good, especially in the first half, but Sean Robinson just could not handle that defense that was the Ohio State Buckeyes, and not many people can. And what Robinson found is how good, how quick these defenders are into the backfield, and they are good. They have great footwork, great speed, and it was Ohio State's defense that won them this game. Now, I know that Dwayne Haskins had 344 yards and 2 TDs, but it was Ohio State's defense that won them this football game. It 100% was. But for a little bit, it looked like the secondary for this Ohio State team was going to be what could lose them the game. So that was a little bit of a, I don't want to say a tale of two halves necessarily, but we saw it. Ohio State's defense gave up some humongous gainers.
Yeah.
I mean, again, one of the things to Anderson, one of the runs was a 93-yarder, and he just went by everybody. But then, you have a number of Ohio State defensive plays where they get these huge interceptions, the sack fumbles, all that kind of stuff to then lead to touchdowns, and you're going, dang, now this is the Ohio State defense I thought I was going to get. So they really showed why they are so good, but they also did show how people can beat them.
Well, and just as an example of, like you were saying, TCU fans that were very confident coming into this one, this is just a nice selection, and I look at the camera that's
you
not
look
there.
to the camera that's out there.
I did, because when I make a point like this, I like to look and make sure they can see that I'm looking at them, but yeah, there's no camera there today. But this one's from Dave, and Dave says, everyone seems to be overlooking that TCU beat 2 teams that were worse than Oregon State and Rutgers. Southern U and SMU, who actually lost the second week to North Texas, 46-23. And Ohio State hasn't played their starters. Don't see this one being close. I started that comment thinking that he was a TCU fan, and I ended it wondering if he was an Ohio State fan. But the point is, if he was a TCU fan, that, it wasn't close. Ohio State won the game handily, and they won 40-28. And for me, I look at this team. Go ahead.
I just want to say really quickly before you move on, but the 14-13 score at halftime.
Yeah. For those of you who can't see, Brandon was raising his hand. That's why I said go ahead.
Because I didn't want to just cut him off, right away. That's rude.
I have to tell them now what you're doing because they can't see it. Like the funniness of you raising your hand.
Like I'm in class still. Excuse me, professor. But it was 14-13 at halftime, and TCU had the lead. TCU played a really good first half, and in Ohio State,
tale of two halves.
It was. It certainly was. But Ohio State really woke up. The defense was rejuvenated. They really seemed like a different team all around. And finally, offensively, they started making some plays, and that was without Nick Bosa for part of the game.
And this is what I was going to get at. Now with Urban Meyer coming back, Ohio State's winning the Big Ten. I saw an article today on ESPN where they're like, Ohio State is the Big Ten's only chance of making the college football playoff. I'm like, good, they're going to do it. Because now that they got through TCU, I look at the teams that we said at the beginning of during the offseason, we said, well, this could be a tough one. This could be a tough one. At Purdue. Purdue's 0-3. There's no way they're going to beat Ohio State. At Michigan State. If Michigan State can't go into ASU and beat a team with a first-year head coach, they're not beating Urban Meyer and what this Ohio State team has been. That's going to be a loss. Michigan. If Michigan couldn't go into South Bend and win a game, there's no way that they're going to go into the Horseshoe and win a game. And then probably the best thing for Ohio State is they get Penn State so early in the year. They play Tulane and then boom, we get Penn State right away. If this is a later game, all right, maybe Penn State comes into their own. But I think that even at Penn State, the Buckeyes can jump on them and get them where they're kind of in a vulnerable state. They've been in games where it's like you almost lose to Appalachian State. They were behind or close in games like against Pitt. And Ohio State can just roll right through. Nebraska hasn't been what we thought. Maryland looked good against Texas, but Texas ain't Ohio State. My point is, their schedule, the teams we thought were going to be tough, seem to be wounded. And now Ohio State is getting back probably their most valuable asset to this team, their fearless leader, Urban Meyer, who is going to be on the sidelines now for the rest of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if this Buckeye team rolls right through, maybe like a close game here or there, maybe like Penn State does play it close, but Ohio State still wins by 4 or 3. But I still, right now, see them winning every game and don't see them losing a single game the rest of the year.
Yeah, I know. I think you're right. Really, this Ohio State team is really good. I mean, they are really good, and that certainly was solidified on Saturday night against TCU, another quality opponent who's now 2-1, and they will certainly be a force in the Big 12. I believe that to be certain. And their defense, they did show. They didn't make enough plays. They didn't force any turnovers by Ohio State. It is tough to do. Ohio State is a really good, effective, and efficient football team. But TCU's defense still did come to play. And while I know I mentioned that Sean Robinson was under duress for a lot of that second half, Dwayne Haskins really didn't get a whole lot of things going in that first half. He struggled mightily. And that was in part, one, because they didn't have a rhythm, but that was in part because TCU's defense was able to break that up. They were able to not allow any rhythm to begin with that Buckeye offense. So TCU, while I know a lot of this is about Ohio State, I still want to give good props to TCU because the Horned Frogs really did play a good game. And while a 40-28 final score may not show that, it was a close ball game. Again, it was 14-13 at the half, and TCU, they went into halftime feeling pretty good. They came out of halftime, though, and it was like two different teams. Ohio State finally turned on the Jets. They ended up being +3 in the turnover, in the turnover margin. It was a really good second half for them, almost to the point where every time TCU had the football, I'm like, okay, what kind of turnover is it going to be now? That's just where the level of that defense is, and why, to your point, everyone on the schedule, no one scares me because of their defense. If Ohio State, we know what their offense is. We know what their offense is. But if Ohio State's defense is that good, no one's got a chance.
If you had to pick one opponent that could be like, all right, this could be a team to upset the Buckeyes, who is it? Because for me, the only one I would look at is I'd be like, maybe Penn State, because like, I'm not confident in Michigan State winning in the horseshoe. I'm not confident in Purdue beating them with how Purdue has looked this season. And I'm not confident in Michigan State.
Penn State in 2 weeks at Happy Valley. That is the only game that I look at of the rest of their opponents that I think that there could be any chance of them falling. Michigan and Shea Patterson, they still have not gotten things going offensively to a point where I think that they would be really confident, going into that game with their offense. Michigan State, I'm not quite sure about Michigan State. I'm not sure what they're doing, but it's not necessarily good. Penn State is the only one. While, yes, they have been slow to start too, I like what Trace McSorley can do as a quarterback and as a leader for this Penn State team. They're 3-0. They're feeling good. I think that Penn State, with the game being at home, they have more of an opportunity, I think, to beat Ohio State than anybody else, even with the game on the road in East Lansing on November 9th.
Let me ask you about one team, and I'm going to throw them out there, and this will just be a question of, I don't think they'll beat the Buckeyes, but they're a team that has given them scares in the past, and the last 2 times this team has come to Columbus, like they will be doing this year, after one quarter, the game was 3-3 the last time these two teams met in Columbus. The time before that, it was 14-10 Ohio State after the first quarter, and then it was 14-13 going into half before the Buckeyes won 42-27. Could Indiana be that team to upset the Buckeyes? I don't think it happens, but they're usually a team, whether it's in Indiana or in Columbus, they give them a real good first half. Then Urban Meyer says, guys, you're the Buckeyes, and they run away with it in the second half.
I don't think so. I think that Ohio State's defense would be too much for Indiana. I just don't think that they have enough offensively to be able to honestly, to keep them in it. I don't think Indiana does. As long as as long as Ohio State stays focused, that's the one thing, is that with Ohio State, with them being as good as they are and as good as they've started off this season. Now, I don't think they're going to overlook this Tulane game. It's right here. It's Tulane. It's this week. They should go in, get it done, and move on to Penn State.
What kind of a statement would that be if the Green Wave came in and said, you lose?
But that's the thing that I was going to mention. Ohio State cannot overlook any games on their schedule. They can't overlook one game to get to the Michigan State game. They can't overlook one game to get to the Michigan game. They certainly can't overlook this Tulane game to get them to the Penn State game. They need to use this Tulane game to build more confidence, to take them in to Happy Valley, to hopefully then go and bring everything they've got at Trace McSorley. McSorley is a guy who can score a lot of points in a hurry. We've seen it. He's got to be able to do that in 2 weeks.
So here's the simple question, and we'll just give our for sure kind of final thought and kind of definitively answer the question. And you can go into Big Ten title game as well, because they'll have that to be a lock. But Urban Meyer returns. This team's 3-0. Are they a lock for the playoffs?
Yes, they are. Ohio State is a certain lock for the playoffs. I don't see them losing more than one game.
I don't see them winning a game. Let's be honest.
Losing.
Yeah, losing a game. I don't see them losing a single one. Like, even the game that we have not talked about in Wisconsin, that's another team. Like, they're still the one that I think is going to win the West. And based off of what I saw, if BYU can beat Wisconsin, Ohio State can steamroll them.
If Ohio State does not lose on the road at Penn State, they will not lose a game this season in the regular season or in the Big Ten championship game.
The only two games I'm the same way. Penn State's the one that if they do lose, I could see it being that one. I'm also just going to circle that Indiana game for fun because Indiana usually comes and plays them
close. They play
close.
them tough. They have many times.
It's fun. It's just like usually the ones in Indiana in Bloomington, it's more of like, this team could actually win this game. Whereas like the ones in Ohio State, it's like, ooh, we give them a fun first half, and then Urban Meyer just slaps him on the back of the head and goes, "What the fuck are you guys doing? You're the Buckeyes." And they go, "Oh yeah, that's right, we're the Buckeyes." And then they run out and run away with the game. But I see this team winning all the regular season games, beating Wisconsin, the Big Ten title game, and they will be either 1 or 2, depending on if Clemson goes undefeated as well. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. With Urban Meyer returning to this Big Ten team, is Ohio State a lock for the college football playoff? Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. But Brandon, let's close out the podcast doing what we do each and every week during football season, and it is make our picks for the top 25 games. Well, all the top 25 games, and then you and I pick one game outside of the top 25. You pick one, I pick one, and we kind of do that to give some love to teams outside the top 25. If you guys are keeping track at home, last week was a good one. We had 3 games that didn't count because they got canceled. Yeah. So basically, if they would have been wins, we would have all had the same thing. If they would have been losses, we would have all had the same losses. So nothing changes there. But I went 15-4. Brandon went 14-5. That brings our yearly totals to Ricky's at 56-8. Brandon is at 53-11. We're going to see if Brandon can catch up and maybe get this week. I've got to. You're taking some chances this week. I like it, but I'm also taking some chances too. Yeah, and I should just play it safe and just make the same picks as you and just win out the rest of the year. But that wouldn't be fun.
No,
that would not be fun.
Don't be like that. No one likes that guy.
I'm not, but it wouldn't be fun. But I will tell you, the last week, if I'm up, I'll probably do that. No. Because I want to win.
Well,
and I'm a winner.
Maybe I won't talk to you anymore.
And I don't raise quitters, and I don't raise losers, but woozers. I don't raise
no quitter and no woozer.
I raise winners. But let's start off the first game. We're actually going to go with the Friday night game. It's weird saying Friday night football for the college ranks. But Penn State, Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. Who you going with, Brandon?
Well, Ricky, this past week, Illinois actually played a pretty good game.
Yeah, they gave me hope. How dare them give me hope?
Led the game against South Florida the entire game until, 2 minutes left to go?
Yep.
And then they give up a huge bomb.
Yep.
I think Illinois is going to be giving up a whole lot of bombs this week, and Penn State's getting the win.
Don't forget that fumble, too, where quarterback goes to do the read option. Do I give it? Do I give it? Do I take it? I'm going to give it. And the running back was not ready for it then.
Yeah, it was all
fumbled.
bad.
Yeah, it wasn't good at all.
At the end.
I'm going with Penn State. Although Penn State has not looked good, we are not Appalachian State, and we are going to get crushed in this one. And that's coming from someone who bleeds orange and blue. Next game, we've got Lane Kiffin and the Florida Atlantic Owls. Remember when they were going to beat Oklahoma?
I don't.
Riley,
Sean might, though.
Yeah, Lincoln Riley does because he's Sean's picture on Twitter. But UCF going to host them. I'm going with UCF, not going with the upset. How about you?
You've got to go with UCF in this one. I don't see Florida Atlantic in the least bit coming close in this game.
And then our next game, we've got not Notre Dame. That's the next one after this. We've got Georgia, Missouri. Missouri broke your heart last week, beating Purdue, the team that was your non-top 25 pick of the week.
Well, Purdue tried to make a comeback in that one, but they just haven't gotten there yet. They have really struggled to start the season. But Missouri is not that good. Georgia is. The Bulldogs with the win.
And then the next one, Notre Dame. They are undefeated on the year. They'll be playing Wake Forest. Shocker that I'm going with ND because usually I don't go with ND, but how about you?
Well, here's what I'll say is that Notre Dame played a pretty darn good game against Vanderbilt. And in Vanderbilt was that team last year. We won Alabama. Well, no, you didn't. And I think they were thinking the same thing probably this year, just not voicing the opinion of, we want Notre Dame, bring them on.
Well, you did hear what their head coach said in the offseason, right? When he was asked at SEC Media Days about going to South Bend, he goes, it's no problem. We play in the SEC.
Yeah, had no problem. Was not scared of Notre Dame or the Fighting Irish at all. But the Fighting Irish did a really good job. The defense, again, has continued to be, I think, the force for this team. While there's still questions kind of surrounding Brandon Wimbush and what he can do and what he will be, and they will be there probably for a good part of this season, Wimbush did a good job on the ground, 84 yards and a touchdown. This Notre Dame Fighting Irish team should be able to continue to roll this week, as I'm taking them.
Well, and then coming up, the next one, Nebraska in Ann Arbor. What are you thinking about this one? The Wolverines, or do the Cornhuskers get their first win of the year?
You know what? I don't think so. Nebraska has not looked good. Scott Frost is not happy with where this team is at, but I think he also realizes this is what he was coming into. The team still has a long ways to go. Michigan, while I don't think they've shown anything overwhelming for me yet to this point, I'm still going to go with the Wolverines.
There was part of me that wanted to pick Nebraska only because I'm not, as the year is going on, I'm not super high on the Wolverines like I was coming into the year. But this is one where Michigan should be able to get the win. Like if they don't, something catastrophically went wrong. They should be able to do business at home. Nebraska goes 0-3. Michigan goes to 3-1. Then another one. We've got Boston College into the top 25 now. They're going to be taking on Purdue in West Lafayette. I am going to go with the favorite in this one. I am going to go with Boston College and the running back of A.J. Dillon, like we talked about in the offseason and had that video that used our podcast in it talking about A.J. Dillon. I'm going with Dillon to have a big game in West Lafayette.
I got a special feeling about this one. I'm going with Purdue.
And that's the upset button because you can't see it this week.
I am going with the Boilermakers. I went with them last week, and they didn't get it done. I'm going with them this week. They're at home. They are going to get a couple of turnovers against Anthony Brown. They're not going to allow A.J. Dillon to run all over him. David Blau is a better quarterback than Sindelar. So let's see the David Blau show. Come on, Purdue. Come on, Purdue. Boiler up, baby. You've got to. Otherwise, I'm not picking you again for the rest of the season. We're done after this. I will break up with you.
Funny thing is I almost did this for my non-top 25 pick where I saw, hey, Baylor's playing Kansas. I should pick Baylor again. And I went, no, Ricky.
Don't do it.
They snake bit you once last week against Duke. Do not pick them again. But Brandon not taking the warning from Purdue, and he's going to go with them over the Boston College Eagles. Then one of the most interesting games in our pick'ems this week, we've got Alabama playing host to Texas A&M. Texas A&M was so close, a 2-point conversion away from forcing overtime against Clemson, and really could have beaten Clemson at home about 2 weeks ago. But they go into Tuscaloosa. Jimbo Fisher's first game against Alabama at Texas A&M. I almost picked the upset in this one. I'll be completely honest. But in the end, it's just one simple rule. You don't pick against Bama. And that's what I'm going with. And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so, Brandon. Who you got?
I've got to go with the Crimson Tide as well. Tua has been so good. Jalen Hurts has been good when he's come in. Damian Harris has been great. Najee Harris has been outstanding. And let's not forget that defense that has been ruthless towards other teams. I think that Kellen Mond on the other side for A&M has been outstanding so far this season. He's looking like a great quarterback over there for Texas A&M. And Jimbo Fisher's going to have a lot of fun with that kid. But Kellen Mond, he hasn't turned the football over yet this season. He will this weekend.
I can't wait to see. Usually Alabama running backs have good games. I can't wait to see, like, Alabama runs for a touchdown. Travion Williams runs for a big touchdown. And then they just go back and forth trading big rushing touchdowns in this game. But I hope it's a good one with Texas A&M and Alabama. Then we move on. A game we thought was going to be a lot interesting, but it's probably not going to be interesting at all because Georgia Tech has not been a good team this year. But in Atlanta, Georgia, Clemson coming in 3-0, Georgia Tech 1-2. I probably would have picked the upset if Georgia Tech was the team we thought they would be, but they're not. Clemson, go Tigers.
Well, let's not forget, though, that Georgia Tech, in their 2 losses, yes, they lost 40 on the road to USF 49-38, still not that far away, and then 24-19 on the road at Pitt. I look more at the people they lost to than necessarily the score. Got to go with Clemson.
Then our next one.
But I will say, be wary, because Clemson always has that one team that for some reason they just drop a goose egg against. Georgia Tech always feels like they could be that team just with how they run their offense. It's so different than what everyone else does, and it's just hard to game plan for it. So I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that out there. I'm picking Clemson, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Then the next 3, these ones should be easy as well. You got Tulane going into Columbus, Ohio against Ohio State. Not a chance either one of us is picking Tulane, right? Going Ohio State all day, every day?
Yeah, Ohio State for sure.
Then the next one, I almost picked the Thundercats, Kansas State to beat West Virginia, but in Morgantown, Will Greer's looked great this year. I'm going with West Virginia to beat the Thundercats. What are you?
I'm right there with you, West Virginia.
And then the next 2 also I think should be easy too. Virginia Tech, they basically got kind of a week off because their game was canceled last week. They go into Norfolk, Virginia to play Old Dominion. That should be a win. And then Miami against Florida Atlantic. That should be another win. I believe you're going with the same thing, Virginia Tech, Miami.
I'm going with Virginia Tech, and last week Miami played Toledo. Toledo was putting up the most points,
highest scoring team
in college football, and Miami went in and said, we can put up a lot of points too, and beat them. So Miami.
And then another game where, okay, I know this is based off of 1 week. TCU loses to Ohio State. Texas looks really good against USC. I almost picked Texas to upset TCU in Austin. I can't do it, though. I got to go with TCU to beat the Longhorns.
I'm going to go with TCU, too. That defense last week, while it wasn't enough to be able to beat the Buckeyes.
I mean, the Buckeyes are a top 4 team.
It will be enough to beat the Longhorns.
Then moving on, a team that is just cracked the top 25 because you beat Wisconsin, and that's what you get. BYU is going to play a team that I'm probably going to say their name wrong. McNeese, one of the 2. Doesn't matter. BYU going to win. Go Cougs.
Ricky, I've said this all the time. When you can't even click on their name in the ESPN app, you're not gonna you're not gonna win. So BYU.
Well, that team's not going to win.
That team certainly won't.
I didn't want people thinking that you were going to say BYU wasn't going to win.
No,
even though you just picked them.
McNeese will not win that game. If you're not clickable, you're not winning.
Then we've got Army going into Norman, Oklahoma to play the Sooners. This is one Sooners, 31.5-point favorites. I got to go with the Sooners to get the win over the Knights.
Yeah, Oklahoma all day.
Then another one. This is probably going to be a boring one because we're going to pick the favorite. But LSU, you beat Auburn. There's no chance you beat La Tech, right? No way you beat Louisiana Tech. Ha, that was a good joke. Tigers with the win.
The Battle of Louisiana. It's not going to be
a fun battle.
Much of a battle for LSU. So LSU gets the win.
And then one that'll get interesting. This is Mississippi State at Kentucky. Only a 10.5-point favorite for Mississippi State. And Kentucky, I'm going to say, a sneaky 3-0 team to start the year. Not many people expected them to beat Florida week 2. What are you thinking? Bulldogs and the Wildcats in Lexington, Kentucky.
Well, Ricky, I'll be honest with you. I saw what Kentucky players did to Reese Davis after he picked against them. They hung him out of a window. I don't want that to happen to me, so I'm just going to hide, make sure they can't find me, because I'm going Mississippi State.
Well, I'll tell you this, Big Blue Nation, Wildcat fans, you do not have to worry. You want to know why? Go get 'em, Tiger, Kentucky. I almost said Kansas. Kentucky, I'm going to do it again just because I want to. Oh, did my mic go off? No, my headphones just went off. Kentucky going to get the win. I will say this, we really got to get a new splitter here in the studio. Maybe some Patreon money would help us out there. But going to go Kentucky to beat the Bulldogs from Miss State. Then a fun one. I'm going to say fun one because it could be a lot of offense. Ryan Gosling and the Texas Tech Red Raiders going up against the Mullet and the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Who are you picking?
Well, they lost, Texas Tech that is, lost to Ole Miss in their first game. They only scored 27 points. They lost by 20, 47-27. They weren't too happy about that. So then they went on to win 77-0 and 63-49, still giving up a lot of points in the 2 games that, really they played anyone. 27, and then 49. And I went against Oklahoma State last week, and I picked Boise.
Yeah, I did
and
too.
I thought I was making a really good play there.
What's
well,
funny
I'm
is
not going to
almost
go
went
against
with
Oklahoma State again. I'm going with the Cowboys, and the Red Raiders are not going to be able to put up that many points. And we're going to continue to see Ryan Gosling be on the hot seat.
Brandon, who does Patrick Mahomes play for?
He plays for the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's what I thought. Oklahoma State in this one. Now, if Texas Tech had Patrick Mahomes still lacing it up for him, I might think about picking the Red Raiders, but no, they're not going to win. I went against the Cowboys last week as well, and I almost picked them, should have picked them. Not going to make that mistake again. This is going to be all business in the front, party in the back, going with the mullet to get the win in Stillwater. Then what should be an easy game for Auburn, they come home after losing to LSU, and they play a team that not only has lost 2 straight, they play a team that is an SEC team in Arkansas that lost to North Texas last week. I got to go with Auburn.
If Auburn takes anything away from that game last week that they'll watch on film between Arkansas and North Texas, they're not going to be able to wait. They probably can't wait until they're able to get a punt return.
You know what might be worse, too? You know how you say if you're not clickable, you're not going to win the game? If I go to your ESPN page and the first article says Arkansas to start Story at quarterback against Auburn, and the picture ESPN uses is just a stock footage Getty Images picture of a football going through the uprights, chances are you're not going to win that game. So, I mean, Arkansas, it's really not looking good for you. You're an SEC team, too.
I've got to go with Auburn. Big bounce-back game this week and a big win.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same. Then one where, I think we're both hitting our buttons for this one, so I'll go ahead and hit mine first. Hoosiers going to get the win over the Spartans.
I've got a special feeling. I really do. And
we just talked him up, too, in the last segment.
And here's the thing, is that Michigan State seems to have all the talent in the world. All the guys returning offensively, defensively. I've talked about this since their last loss to Arizona State. They haven't been able to put it together. They've been asleep at the wheel. Indiana is going to sneak up and get the win.
And then the next game, because I'm going Indiana as well, the next one, we already previewed this one, Stanford and Oregon. So if you haven't checked out that preview, go ahead and check it out. And if it's actually the day that this picks video posted, it'll be out tomorrow. But Stanford going into Eugene, Oregon. Technically, Stanford is the favorite no matter which way you look at it, rankings or line. But Brandon, I got to go with the Oregon Ducks. They're going to be up 28-7 by the end of the first. They'll be up 35-10 by the end of halftime. They'll win the game 42. I'm going to go 42-17 Ducks on top in Eugene.
Ricky, Justin Herbert has done a really good job leading the Ducks so far this season. He needs to be a little bit more careful with some of his passes, not be so errant with his throws, but I think this kid has done an outstanding job. You look at Stanford, Bryce Love, is he going to play? And then if he does, is he 100% healthy? The defense has been less than stellar. And I've got a special feeling, so I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks as well. The game's in Eugene. I think the Ducks win, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any means.
And then 2 more ranked games. We've got Wisconsin. We've got Iowa. This one's going to be in Iowa City, Iowa. Wisconsin's only a 3.5-point favorite, but I almost picked Iowa in this one. I can't go against the Badgers, even though I'll probably be wrong. I'm going to go Wisconsin over Iowa.
Before Saturday's game, Wisconsin, I believe, was a 7-point favorite. Saturday's game happens. They're now a 3.5-point favorite.
We'll see what happens as we get closer to Saturday.
They lost 24-21, did Wisconsin, to BYU at home. At home. Ricky, can you please let me know, remind me of what happened last season when Ohio State went in to play Iowa, an Iowa team that, who cares? It's Iowa. That's going to be an easy one. Can you remind me of what happened?
Just 55-24, Hawkeyes with the win.
I think Iowa's going to be able to get this game. It's at home. There's going to be a lot of momentum on the side of Iowa because Wisconsin just lost. I think the Hawkeyes are going to feel really good about themselves right now. that they could knock off Wisconsin again, and then they're going to have a real opportunity at the West in the Big Ten. They're really going to want this game. I know there's no Josh Jackson in the secondary. I get that. But this Iowa team, I think they're going to sneak up and get the Badgers.
He got a Josh Jackson, didn't he get a pick six this week against the Vikings in Green Bay? I think he got a pick six and did a Lambeau leap. But
I am not sure.
Funny thing, I'm looking at Iowa. If we go back 2016 Wisconsin game, yeah, they lost it in Madison, but it was 17-9, so that was a close one. And then actually 2015, they beat Wisconsin in Iowa, 10-6 was the final score. So this Iowa team, likes to play ranked Big Ten teams close. So I could be wrong, but I'm going to go with the safe pick and go with Wisconsin. And then the last one from the top 25, we've got Washington on one side of this matchup, and the other team that they are playing, I got to click back a couple things because I was deep in Iowa territory. We've got Arizona State going into Washington. I would have probably picked Arizona State if they won last week, but now that you lose to San Diego State, I don't think you're going to beat Washington.
Yeah, I've got to go with Washington. They're at home. They won last week. I've got to go with the Huskies.
And then for our, I'm going to call it the non-top 25 pick of the week. Brandon, what's your non-top 25 pick of the week?
So this past weekend, we saw Florida State lose to Syracuse and just absolutely look horrible. And I know Willie Taggart came out and said, hey, give us a chance. We've only had a couple of games. Give us a chance. You stick with us. Don't jump off the bandwagon. Don't lose faith yet. Well, Florida State, you may not want to lose faith, but I'm still going to go with Northern Illinois in this one. I know it's on the road for Northern Illinois.
What up?
And I have not bought in. Now since the season has started, I'm not buying into Florida State right now.
Remember when I said, hey, doubt Willie Taggart and Florida State, and all those Florida State fans got mad at me? Yeah, who was right? This is where we steal the segment from the herd, where instead of when Colin was right, when Ricky was right. And this is where I go on like my 10-minute tangent about Florida State. I told you this was going to happen, and you all laughed at me. So now I'm going to stand here and
cursed at you.
I'm basically going to pull my Eric Cartman moment and go, na boo boo, I was right and you were wrong. But the game I'm going to go with is a team that got a big win last week over those Seminoles. I am going with Dino Babers and the Syracuse Orange to get the win at home against UConn this week. They're going to go to 4-0. They are going to be a team we talk about this year in the ACC. Will they win it? No, they won't, because they'll lose to Clemson. But they will go 4-0 after beating UConn this week. What a story for Syracuse to go 3-0 after beating Florida State this week.
And there you have it. The picks are in.
I thought you were going to say something about Syracuse, but
no,
this
I had
is where
nothing,
you guys
I had
come
nothing
in.
to say other than they're going to probably be doing it without their quarterback, Dungy, and we'll see. I mean, he was hurt in the game last week, had to come out. We'll see how serious the injury is going forward, but it was still good to see, because when we talked about the Orange at the beginning of the season, we talked about how offensively they should be better, they could be better. Well, they are better, and that is good to see for Syracuse.
And the thing that I am counting, if you're keeping track at home, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 chances for Brandon to try to get back. So if my math is correct, if Brandon in those 4 games goes 4-0 against me, you could technically jump one ahead of me.
I won't. I'll be wrong in all of them.
But there's a possibility that you can only jump like 3 up on me. Well, that'd be 2.
There's also a possibility that I could go down a lot.
Yeah, there's a possibility. So really, it's you're lucky that I picked like Indiana with you and Oregon with you, but there's a couple where the upset bug could be biting some teams this week. But this is where you guys come in. Make your picks down below in the comment section. Let us know what your upsets are. I almost wanted to press my upset button this week for the Clemson game, because it just makes sense with the Spider-Man, Go Get 'em Tiger. If you can't tell, I'm really hooked on Spider-Man. I've been playing that video game like nonstop for the past 2 weeks. But make your picks down below. Let us know what your non-top 25 pick of the week is. Want to thank you guys. Tell us what you think about anything in the podcast that you listen to. Housekeeping here at the end. Make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. That's how you help support the channel. Make sure that you go get yourself an MVP t-shirt. That link is down below in the description. Or you can get it at mostvaluablepodcast.com, where you can get your MVP each and every day. Also, make sure to go over to iTunes and please give us a 5-star rating and let people know why this podcast is not a couple of good old boys. We talked about Auburn, but it wasn't even just an Auburn segment. It was with Wisconsin in there too. So we talked about many things, non-SEC. You got to let the people know because they won't believe what we have to say. Want to thank you guys for listening on podcast services around the world. Want to thank you guys for listening on YouTube. We will be back next week with the video. Sorry for the inconvenience, but as always, have a good day, everybody.